First of all, do you want to introduce yourself, your role at Sephora, and then after that we'll dig into what you do with creators.
All right, yeah, so I'm Stuart. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Asia Pacific here at Sephora. I've been in role for about 2 years. Before that, I've worked for FMCG companies for about, maybe I don't want to say the number of years, but across alcohol, jewelry, and packaged goods with Procter & Gamble.
Cool. Now, I'm not going to ask why Sephora works with creators, because I feel like the sector that you're in, beauty, is kind of synonymous with creators. It would almost be weird if you weren't working with creators. So to give some context, I guess my first question is, how significant is, your usage of creator content, and how has that changed? And we were talking before in the previous panel about the marketing funnel. Where does it kind of sit within the funnel of your kind of overall digital marketing?
Yeah, I would probably say, first of all, for those of you in the audience that are starting out as brands, I think Sephora does not by any means have a lock on how to do it. I think, as you say, because of the industry, we've been forced to explore it. But originally, we were making very similar mistakes to the rest of the industry in terms of being very transactional, as the team before us was talking about, speaking much more on an ad hoc basis and doing a lot of sponsored content. I think the role that we've moved forward in the last couple of years with the team has been to translate that into a completely collaborative, non-sponsored program set that looks at a couple of different tiers of creators and finds and tries to build the program. And that's kind of been a big evolution for us. So, we've been on that journey ourselves, and, what I'm excited to talk about today is probably how we did that and the lessons we learned, so you can maybe avoid making some of the mistakes we did.
Let's start with that, because I think one of the interesting things about this is, as consumers and as marketers, we kind of understand that authenticity does kind of influence the purchase decision. There is an element there of the more authentic it feels, the more likely you are to purchase. How do you kind of measure that yourself? How are you looking at that?
I think it goes back to the question I didn't properly answer, which was, what's the role of influencers? And I think one of the classic mistakes you guys would have heard the team talk about before us in the panel was, when you're not sharp going in on what you're trying to solve as a problem, you can sometimes end up using creators in an ineffective way. So the very first thing we look at Sephora is where they fit in terms of what tool they deliver into the program of our total marketing strategy. And for us, that's looking at consideration. So we find that, if you think about the purchase funnel, the old classic of being awareness, consideration, trial, and getting into sort of conversion and purchase, where people talking about your brand and why you should come visit it is best categorized is in consideration. And that answers why authenticity is so crucial, because if I wanted to just tell people about Sephora, I could do it myself directly, far more efficiently with media. If I wanted to drive trial and conversion, we have tools like performance marketing that does that far more efficiently and far more effectively. But as an advertiser, we cannot ourselves make us look cool. The only people who can do that, and it's like the classic high school problem, right? You can't go into a cafeteria and say, I'm cool. That's not going to make you cool. But when everybody else is talking about you, that's how you convey that. And so that's where the role of creators sit in our strategy.
My next question, and I'm going to preface this with, earlier on Stuart said, you can be controversial. I think this is the only thing that I'm going to say that you might disagree with, is that I spend too much money on Sephora as a consumer. You probably think there's no one that spends too much money, but trust me, I do. But one of the reasons I do is because I go into the store and you have these wonderful associates, the beauty associates, that are so helpful that you go in thinking you're going to buy one thing, you end up buying 10. But it's an enjoyable experience because they kind of are so knowledgeable, they kind of help you with your problems or kind of, whatever you're trying to look for. It's fantastic. So one of the, I guess what I want to dive into is one of the projects you're working on where you use these guys as creators. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Not controversial yet, so you can keep it going. And by the way, thank you for supporting us. So one of the things that we've built out, it sort of actually came out, Charlotte, from a couple of conversations that we were having during store checks. So what we realized was, and hopefully some of you have been to a Sephora, And what you'll see is, I do agree, I don't think it's an uncommon experience. Our beauty associates are in many ways our brand ambassadors. But when we talk to a lot of the guys in our stores, one of the things that we know about them is a lot of the reason they chose us as a retailer to work for are because of their passion for beauty. They love the industry, they love talking about it. Some of them are makeup artists that, you know, will eventually, and this has happened to us, go on to launch makeup brands themselves or become professional influencers. And what we discovered kind of organically during our social listening was they were already doing their own social media accounts. They were already doing how-tos, get ready with me's, and those kind of content. And it occurred to us that we have inside our own employee pool a bunch of people who are better at making content than some of our creative content teams can, in terms of making it work on TikTok, making it authentic on Instagram. And we're very knowledgeable and very passionate already. And the program we started creating was, how could we mobilize and support these people in a way that felt entirely authentic, embraced what they were doing, but simply gave them more access, more resources, more support. We launched that program back in October of last year. In our first pass amongst our 300 strong eligible candidates for the program, we had 80 applications, which is not bad given that we did it around Christmas when everyone was super busy. And we've actually started now seeing more than a 10% engagement rate in terms of how that content is resulting in responses. These guys are incredibly excited. We're actually trying to keep up with them. They keep asking for more projects, more ideas, and more programs. And the content is working so well, we've started putting that in front of our stores and onto our advertising campaigns, where it's outperforming our ads.
That's really cool. So how does that work? Do you kind of brief them in, or, you know, how does that practically kind of work in terms of kind of using them?
I think one of the things that we knew we'd have to crack is when you're dealing with either a nano influencer or a moderate tier influencer program, you need to find a way to build as a brand an infrastructure that lets you support at scale. You know, if this thing is going to be a one-off conversation that you have with every BA, or every beauty associate or every influencer, you're going to run into a problem where you just can't keep up with the number of creators you need to make a dent in the industry. So the way it works for us is, at least at the beauty associate level, we're doing what we call creativity boosters through our learning modules. So we run trainings constantly for our beauty associates. That's why they're so knowledgeable and up to date. One of the things we do for the eligible and it's a volunteer program. We don't mandate anyone join. We say, if you'd like to, this is a program that you're available to. It gives you access to sneak peeks into new products, events and trainings that our brand partners or Sephora does, and a chance for what of your content to be amplified. But there are a couple of ground rules we kind of created. One was we had a scalable way of informing and inspiring them through our learning modules. The second thing is we look at the content on their platform. So we don't put, we debated this long and hard, but for a brand safety reason, as well as to make sure these creators are rewarded for what they made, we thought it was better for them to continue to build their following on their account. And then what we do is we elevate that content if it's, you know, meeting our safety requirements and it's stuff we think has merit, and amplify it with paid media or own platform support. And so the creator gets the excitement of seeing, our beauty associates get the excitement of something I made, the company has now put on their homepage, or the company has now put on their social media, and we give them credit and help them grow their following in the process. So our ambition is, at some point, one of our beauty associates will become a major influencer that we then have to work with in a whole new way in one of our other programs. But, you know, that's how we hope to home grow talent. And I think that's why the program's been getting such great support.
Yeah, I love that. It's a win-win. They're getting something from you. You're kind of supporting them to develop their careers in different ways. You know, and you're, to your point, kind of, you've got this community there that you can kind of lean on to create content. It's fantastic. I wanted to dig more into the more traditional sense of a creator community. Sure. Now. We've kind of already commented on the fact that kind of more authentic content improves the efficacy of the content. So can you tell us a bit about how you've managed to balance that with your more traditional community of creators? I'd love to hear a bit more about Sephora Squad and what you're doing there.
Sure. So if we go up from nano influencers to our more regular influencer program, one of the things we started with, and I want to be very transparent here, is we started with a very sponsored model. We were paying creators. It was a transactional relationship. We would brief, please say this sort of stuff, and please come back with content. And we were getting the same feedback you heard come kind of throughout most of this morning and into the afternoon, which is, hey, that's a kind of crappy way to work. But one of the things that I'm very and I think on the brand side, I can represent brands on this one and say it's really hard to find a model that spins at scale and lets you collaborate authentically. So we took a step back and kind of ripped out the playing book and said, how would we do it again if we said that that's the baseline? And what we realized was we needed as a brand team to build a platform that would let creators have the flexibility, but let us also operate with scale. And that's where Sephora Squad came from. So the elevator pitch of Sephora Squad is it's a program where we handpick creators with incredibly authentic relationships with their communities. And we ask them we ask them whether they'd like to have a relationship with Sephora directly. This is not via a PR agency. We actually outreach ourselves. And we ask them the question of how can Sephora help you build your platform? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to build your followership? Are you trying to expand your audience to another market? Are you trying to build a reputation or equity as being a particular expert? Would you at some point like to monetize yourself in the forms of brand sales? Is your passion education and you just want an opportunity to teach more people? And then we try to think back to what we're trying to do from a marketing standpoint in the realm of consideration and try to find overlaps. So every single brand inside the Sephora Squad has an annual joined up business plan we build with them for an annual content plan where they align on what they want to do with us and then we go help produce it. It's the same amount of investment as a sponsored program, but what we try to do is avoid any kind of editorial contamination. So everything the creator is doing is what they've pitched to us, and we're providing support in the form of product, sample, travel, production costs, but never influencing the outcome. And that's because we really do feel it's important for us to preserve that authenticity as we work the relationship. And it's been a really interesting program because it has created a multiplying effect on the number of creators that want to work with us in this program in this way. And we've actually had a very low dropout rate on this program being non-sponsored, but being our king program. So it's actually resulted in us reducing steadily the amount of sponsored content we need to do and the amount of creators who want to be sponsored. Yeah. They prefer this relationship, and sometimes they come and ask us, can we work for other partners? Because we don't want to lose this. And they want to pay, and I don't want to risk you guys being unhappy with us if I do it. And it's also meant that in many cases, they've given us better ideas than we had going in. So, it's resulted in some of our hair care campaigns being fronted by influencers who are passionate about being seen as hair experts. We had one creator, Ashley Day, out in Australia, who's a fantastic makeup artist. She wanted just an opportunity to teach our BAs, which was an incredible opportunity for our BAs, and let us do a masterclass here in Asia for her, just to teach people and teach her fans here in Asia. So we continue to kind of work on that basis.
I love that. And in the context of the panel previous to this isn't being done by a lot of brands, right? It sounds like a lot of brands are kind of not really listening to creators. It's just by doing that simple act of kind of asking, what do you want? What do you want to gain from this? It seems like that's been kind of valuable.
I think the secret masterclass that we unlocked for ourselves, right, is you start with what you're trying to do with a creator. You've got to be really sharp on your goal. Once we realized it was consideration, and specifically credible consideration, we knew it had to be 100% authentic. The whole point of the exercise was to work with creators and to access their community. So making sure they were doing it in a way that made sense to them and they thought would be genuinely engaging to their audience became kind of requirement. And all of a sudden that meant we couldn't brief. The other thing we realized was if I'm going to put that much work into co-creating something, it needs to be an ongoing, always-on, scalable sort of exercise, which meant we needed an infrastructure or a platform. And we also saw that the brand as platform, and it's a little bit like what you heard Epic Games talk about in terms of Fortnite, when we're the platform, we can be quite scalable and quite effective while also being almost more authentic as a partner. Because now we're here to talk about beauty with you. And how you want to talk about it should be what makes sense for your community. The big hard work was, I think, figuring out, making a commitment up front to build a program when you're starting with 10 creators. And we started with 10 creators back in, I want to say, June of last year. We are now up to 90 with a program that's gotten to a similar size for the region. So we're bringing in influencers for Asia from the United States and places all across the region who have multi-market sort of significant scale. And then smaller level local Sephora squads, which are for creators that are yet to kind of get multi-market but are starting to build traction inside a market across Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, India, Australia, and New Zealand.
So that's really scaled quite quickly.
I think once we cracked how to do it, and to also, and this is very important. It hits differently when you get reached out as a creator by the brand, and the first thing they want to do is know how they can help you grow. The second thing that really unlocked it was when we said, you have a seat at the table, but it is up to you to help us figure out a win-win way to work. So the creator then puts their creativity to work on, okay, this is a cool partner. How can I make it work for them as well as me? Then making sure we have a quarterly review process where it became very evident to us which creators were just like, well, I won't do anything unless you pay me. And which creators were like, oh, could you do this or this or this? And the guys with wish lists ended up being our best partners because they were so creative and so inspirational that they almost took up all the bandwidth we had. And the ones that waited for briefs or waited to be paid, we've started using that intelligence to help us be a little bit more sharper in who we look for and what kind of creators are worth investing in.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that this has all stemmed from the fact that you've done the thinking to know that you're looking for this credible consideration. It kind of comes back to that. I want to link this into another thing that you're doing that I think is quite interesting, which is that in this kind of space of beauty, a lot of the execution can sometimes kind of be connected to events and experiential experiences. Can you tell us a little bit how you've shifted the format of your kind of events around kind of using creators and how that's kind of worked better for you?
Yeah. So this happened to me very early in taking over from Sephora. We do press days twice a year in every single market. They are something, we're very fortunate that because our press days involve us talking about all the brands inside Sephora that are of newness, we, by virtue of just having all of that concentrated content, have become very popular. My first PR crisis was influencers were mad that they didn't get invited to our press event, which for any of you who have done press events for any other brand never happens. So I was like, I don't understand how this is even a problem. But fortunately, the other thing that we also did was when we were starting to do postmortems on our press event, what we realized was we just got a ton of selfies. And so again, we got sharper on, we called it the selfie problem inside Sephora, right? So we started going, well, at the end of the day, why do you do a PR event? You're doing a PR event because you're trying to inspire a community of creators to talk about you on their channels, right? If that's the goal, how would you change the way you design a PR event? Is the canapes and the venue as important, or is it actually how do I inspire in the experience I curate a situation where someone wants to post? A situation where it's really about something that makes me look good and lets me bring content to the table that I would like you to include in your post, please. Right? So how do I incentivize something other than a selfie? One of the things we realized was we keep doing these gorgeous brand walls, which keep meaning that we're incentivizing selfies. So we started thinking about, we knew that people wanted to make the content about them as a creator doing something cool for their community, something that would be helpful. So look how good I look is one of the reasons why selfies are so successful on social. So we started thinking about, well, what else could work? And our press, we realized that, well, when I'm getting an experience, I'm more likely to talk about it. I get my hair styled, I get a makeover. That's about me, and it's also something of interest to my community. The other thing we realized was if I'm bringing a content angle that's useful for the creator, because she or he is under a ton of pressure to constantly drive content to her audience. So if I can make that a little bit easier by making it something that they can take wholesale and just post, with a little bit of their own creative spin, that's useful too. So the two big interventions, first of all, we stopped calling it Press Day and started calling it House of Sephora. And the idea behind it was to make House of Sephora a place where creators would learn about what the future of the industry would be. So instead of, and it used to be an expo booth, you'd walk in and you'd see just booths after booths from each of our partner brands where you'd be able to walk to the booth and see the products and maybe sample, and then a big back wall which you'd take a selfie in front of. We moved it to how do we group our newness into trends? Because we realized that that's the kind of content people want to talk about. What's new in hair? What's the next look going to be? and then how do we feature the newness inside that angle. And then we looked at how do we make that the stage that people want to post content on. Do I attach an experience to it where you can try it all on together and see how you look with one of our beauty associates? Or do I make it an experiential zone that sort of lands the point and has all the brands featured so you can film yourself in this space, and that's content you'll want to post that's educational and hits our brand message. So now the way we approach a press event is we start with what's the content back strategy, what kind of posts do we want, and then how do we make sure our experience is staging that kind of content and making that what you want to capture. And by the way, it's also synergized a little bit with the Sephora squad. We're starting to use our creators who are partners with us to run masterclasses, to do talks, and that's adding another layer of authenticity to what we're driving, because instead of bringing brands or, God forbid, me to these kind of events, we're starting to really make it something where the community is talking to the community and introducing themselves to what's going to be hot in beauty in the next 6 months.
Yeah, you're putting yourself in the shoes of the creators, right? You're thinking editorially. I think that's such a good place to start from. We're just running out of time, so I know we're holding you before lunch. My last question, just briefly, is about the AI question. We've talked about authenticity. What's your perspective on creators using AI, the use of AI, and how that might impact authenticity?
I think AI is the shiny new object of the marketing world, like it was the metaverse a year ago, it was NFTs before that. I don't dispute that. I probably, unlike those two, I think AI has the most potential to be a shifter for us. And I also think there are some ethical concerns, though, that it raises around how do you make sure, especially when you're talking about creators, the content that was used to train the AI is factored in. Right? And I do think, though, the one thing that makes me more assured in a creator context, which was your question, I'm much more confident artists will respect other artists than I think the question that somebody got asked earlier today, which was for brand standpoint. So as a brand, I'm very cautious because I do not want to infringe on artists' work. As a creator, I'm a little bit more interested to see from an art form standpoint how they use AI to bring it to life, and a little bit more confident that an artist will not infringe on another artist's work, though as a brand, I'm going to make sure I double check that.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a really positive spin on that.
Yeah. Well, the best technology has always resulted in better art.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to seeing what creators make.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Stuart.
Thanks so much, guys. Enjoy lunch.